Welcome to the night and day cowl. This is something I've been experimenting with lately, and it's a sort of variant on the double knit blankets that I love to do, but in this case it's a smaller project that can be done with a far smaller amount of yarn. So I'm using the Knit Circus gradient yarns again, and my outside yarn starts in a medium blue going to dark, and my inside yarn is going to be going into green and then into turquoise. So it's going to look quite exciting on both sides. I've begun this with 14 points. I wanted to have a little fullness at the top, and my plan for the overall design was to have this full fold over ruffle, then go into the star patterns here, and this is designed to fit not snugly around the neck, but enough to keep the drafts out. This is designed to gradually get larger and larger, much like the blankets, with the increases back to every 4 rounds. And then we can keep on going until we've used up the colours. So we've got a little bit more stars to come before we get into reverse stocking stitch, which is only an option. But first I want to show you how to make the double decreases. They're a little bit fiddly, but worth the effort, and they don't go on for very long. Each of these points has 5 double decreases, so we get rid of 10 of the original stitches. So let's have a look at that. A double decrease can be done in many different ways. I want my right hand stitch of the 3 to be decreased to wind up on the top of the decrease. So I want them stacked in order, right hand, left hand, and then the middle one underneath. So they make a stack like that. So the easiest thing to do is to separate out the 2 layers to begin with and put the 3 stitches that need to be decreased together side by side on the needle. So I've just slipped the 2 sets of stitches apart and slipped them back onto the left needle. Now we can go about the double decrease just as we normally would. So in order with these conventionally mounted stitches, to make them with the right hand one on top, I need to slip as if to knit the first stitch, knit the next 2 together, and very gently pass the slip stitch over. We want to be as gentle as possible not to distort it. So that's my front decrease done. And now I'm ready for the far layer. I've moved both my yarns forward, and I'm going to begin by slipping the first stitch of the far layer. Then I'm going to turn these 2 stitches and return them to the left needle. And by putting my needle into the inner one, then the outer one, I'm going to purl those 2 stitches together. That will put this stitch on top, and then very gently lift the one I slipped over. So I'm now down to 1 stitch on each side. And on this arrangement I've got my left stitch on top, but as long as I'm consistent on both sides it doesn't matter. So I think that's how I'm going to work, with the right stitch on top on the front layer, left stitch on top on the back layer, and the only other decreases you will see on this side will all be sloping to the left. So as long as you're consistent, it really doesn't matter. If you've been working with unconventionally mounted purls, we'll have to rethink it. The front remains the same, so we'll separate the layers. Remount the stitches. So I'm remounting them in unconventional orientation, although you could perfectly well change them to normal stitch mount whilst you're separating the 2 groups of stitches. So I'm going to slip my first one, knit my other 2 together, gently pass the first one over. That's my front decrease done. And And now I'm going to slip my first stitch to turn it back to normal stitch mount. These two are already turned, so I can just go straight into them. Oh, we're doing unconventional rotation here. So purl those two together and then gently lift the first one I slipped over. So in fact, I would say it's actually slightly easier with unconventional stitch mount. So here is a point, and I've decreased with the right stitch on top on this layer, and it's the left stitch on top on the other layer. But the other kind of point is slightly different because of stitch numbers. I wanted to end up with 2 stitches left, so I've decreased a left slanting decrease before the marker position and a right slanting decrease afterwards. So those are conventional decreases.